again. Well, you'd hardly believe that we are within the city limits of Glasgow. This river itself joins the Clyde right in the city centre. Gardeners here have a lot to cope with, being well over 400 feet above sea level, receiving 60 inches of rain and frost that can continue right through May and come again in early September, making the growing season very short. But that doesn't deter gardeners from up here from some very successful gardening. In fact, I'll be visiting a national collection of hostas held in the garden right beside this lovely waterfall.
On the other side of Carmunnock is Cameron Carmichael's garden, which is mainly laid down to lawn, with informal beds and borders packed with trees, shrubs and perennials. There's also a large pool where koi carp glide smoothly beneath rafts of water lilies. Cameron, who had to take early retirement because of ill health, bought his plot 15 years ago when it was part of an agricultural field. Despite its exposure to strong southwest winds and a native soil which is a stiff, acid loam with a pH of 4.5, Cameron's succeeded in establishing a wide range of plants here. There are roses of many kinds, including the vigorous and reliable Fru Dagmar Hastrup, whose pale rose-pink flowers are replaced by large tomato red hips. Lilies are another of Cameron's favourites, especially this one, Casablanca, which is a good doer here despite the less than ideal conditions. There are many fine foliage plants, like this Aurelia elata, Aurea variegata. It's a small deciduous tree, not often seen in gardens, though it's quite hardy. If there's one thing I'm envious of, Cameron, it's your primulas. They grow like cabbages here.
Well, of course, we've got the damp West Coast climate, and they seed themselves all over the place.
That special one there?
That's Postford White, which is a form of japonica, which incidentally comes true from seed. And the majority of these plants are seedlings. And over on the left here, we've got Primula purvirulenta, which is another species with a purplish pink flower. And in the middle here, we've got a hybrid between the two, which has got a superb fluorescent pink flower, great big candelabra, about 3 feet high, and with a gorgeous Mila milliferina. And I'm thinking of calling this plant after my wife, Anne.
Really?
Yeah.
Is that a hybrid of the two?
It's a hybrid of the two.
And how would you be propagating that?
I'd propagate this from division, and what I'm about to do just now, I'm just about to lift this plant.
Is this the normal time for division?
I would normally divide it about a month earlier, just after flowering, is when I would normally do it.
So you've got a nice space here as well. They don't mind the sun then?
No, Roy, I don't mind the sun as long as I've got plenty of moisture. I put down plenty of peat in the ground to retain the moisture, and of course because of the extremely acid conditions and being natives of limestone areas of the Himalayas, they like lots of lime. So
what kind of lime are you putting on? What do you use?
We use ground limestone here because with the rhododendrons and that adjacent, we don't want the lime moving around the garden. And as we plant the plants into the ground, lime goes in along with the plants.
So how would you say about splitting this with a fork?
I would normally wash it in a bucket of water so as to do as little damage as possible to the roots. And we'd put them into a bucket of water and soak it for quite some time. Move it up and down quite a few times to get all the soil off the roots. And then...
No, they're falling apart, aren't they? You don't have to pull them out.
Yeah, you are, Roy. You can give me a hand here.
How many plants have you got? How many do you want for this?
This is 1, 2, 3. Tell you what, Roy, you divide them up and I'll plant them.
Okay. I reckon you could get about 2 dozen out of this if you really wanted that. And each one is quite stout and strong with a good root system. And see what the soil does. It gets it very, as you said, very clumpy and hard, but it just dissolves it.
Now, of course, it's important to give them plenty of water after they've been planted.
Sure. You don't cut the leaves, to reduce the transpiration.
If I was doing it immediately after they flowered, I would normally cut the leaves, but at this time of the year, they've already made their growth for the summer. And of course, it would weaken the crown for the winter time. So as long as they get a good soaking.
You can almost hear them saying, lovely, lovely. You can't wait to get going.
Well, of course, they've got a fairly deep root system and they like to get their feet down into the muck.
You certainly know how to grow plants well, Cameron. That clematis there is a beauty. Which one is it?
That's Integrifolia hendersoni.
It sounds suitably Scottish, that. Is it fairly easy to grow?
It's fairly easy to grow, provided it's in the right position. Full sun, well drained, and piles of lime.
That's an herbaceous.
It is a herbaceous clematis. Cut it down in the early spring.
Nice contrast with that pink diacia there. And I see you're growing inevitably that flame creeper or Scotch creeper, which many people are envious of and can't grow. So what's your secret?
Well, I've tried it on several occasions. Each time I bought pots with the plant and planted it, it just died. Then a friend said to me, "Are you trying to grow the flame creeper? It's dead easy. How do you do it?" She said, "Come along in February. I'll give you some young roots. They're just like pieces of spaghetti. You plant them horizontally under the surface at a depth of just about 1 to 2 inches, just under the surface, and up they all came. Simple as that."
That's certainly looking very happy with you.
Here's a mistake. We've actually planted a Viticella purpurea on the cornice. Of course, the idea was that we'd get the gorgeous shade of purple against the greyish of the cornice, and of course the cornice had just taken over and swamped the Viticella.
You just about see its flowers poking through the top though, can't you?
Yeah, you can.
Very difficult though.
However, we've got a success round the corner. We've planted a double form of the same clematis on the Parotia persica, and of course the Parotia is not as invasive as the cornice, and it's a tremendous success.
And it's a young Parotia, so
It's a young Parotia.
no
growing
problems
skills,
yet.
No problems at all.
Which variety is this one?
It's Viticella purpurea plena elegans. It's a terrible mouthful, but I'm afraid that's its name.
What an exquisite flower.
It's a gorgeous thing, just like velvet.
When you move into a new house, you don't necessarily inherit a wonderfully established garden. And this was exactly the problem that Donald and Katie Downey had when they moved into theirs. And you've still got problems, I gather. May we have a look?
Yes. When Donald and I bought the house, we inherited this wheat patch, and we really have no idea how to get rid of it quickly. And
yes, you've got one or two problems I can see. And typical with gardening, there's no easy way of doing it, but you have got two basic choices. One is to systematically fork through this area, but you'll have to be very careful. There's a mixture here of annual and perennial weeds. The problem with perennial weeds, take for example like this dandelion. If I dig down here, I should be able to show you what the root looks like. There, down below the ground, they have a root like this. Now, if you leave any section of that root in the ground, so if you dug this out and took that away and just left that little bit, you'll find you'll get another plant growing from it. So if you fork right through, remember to take everything out. The other thing that you could use, in fact, is a systemic weed killer. Now, it's called a systemic weed killer because basically it gets into the system here. So it will go through the leaves and down here into the root and kill that as well. Now, you will get left with plant material on the top if you do it like that, but then you can just go through and tidy it up afterwards.
right, well, we also have a problem at the back, a very narrow and shaded garden. As you can see, we've cleared the weeds, but really have no idea what kind of plants to put in. It's mainly in the shade. The house shades most of the garden, so it's quite moist as well.
Yes, I can see your problem, in fact, over there, like you said, it's really moist, and yet on the other side, down here, it's incredibly dry, mainly because you've got this huge Lelandii hedge dominating everything. And I can see, yes, it'll give you a few problems. But I did pop and visit Mr. Evans, who lives close by, and in fact, I think if we go around there and have a look, he started off in the same situation, but if we see his garden, it'll give you a tremendous amount of encouragement. Hi, Stuart. I'd like you to meet Katie.
Hi,
Hello.
Katie.
Hello.
She has problems similar to the problems that you had when you first moved into this garden. So I'm hoping that you'll give her a little bit of encouragement.
Well, I hope so. I mean, if it was anything like mine, I nearly committed suicide. Mud everywhere. Promised a level garden. Walked in, the mud went, the hill actually went from there to there, there to there, and every time it rained, it was a mud bath with the water lapping against the house.
Oh, dear.
Fought with the builder and got a wall built. The rest I've done myself. One I'll show you.
Thanks. Well, you've certainly got plenty of plants.
Well, we need to do them, but first, before the plants had to level this, I was a bit knackered because the slope still went up.
How did you get all your plants? Did you buy them from the garden centre?
Well, price was a consideration. I stopped work 3 years ago due to ill health. So what I did, I went to where people had established gardens, looked for the nearest bit of waste ground, which was the rubbish dumps. And believe 90% of this garden here was picked up in rubbish dumps. The other method is go to the garden centres, find out where the damaged and unlabelled plants are. You can get them very cheaply, they're willing to haggle. For example, this tree here, I bought that for the blossom it's turned into a damson tree. That was £5 this year. This silver thing, whatever it is, because I don't know the name of any plants, was £1. Picked that up in the rubbish dump this week. Picked that up in the same rubbish dump. People throw out. It's amazing what they throw out.
So do you take cuttings and plant them
Take a
around
lot
the
of
place?
cuttings. This is my cutting area down here. Come on down, I'll show you them. This is it here. And by the way, talk about throwaway society. These 2 pots were in the rubbish dump just down the road there.
Very good.
Filled up.
That's-
What I've got here is also some plants for you. All I do is a wee bit potting compost, pop them in, water them and pray. And about 50% take. This is something for you to start off your garden.
Lovely, thanks
It
very
should give
much.
you some colour next year.
Great, thanks a
Fine.
lot.
So do you feel any more confident now about it, Katie?
Yes, yes. Go home and give it a good try.
Kittock Mill is hidden away in this pretty glen, but isolated as it might seem, people are drawn here from far and wide. They come to see one of Britain's 3 national collections of hostas that's held here. In fact, the garden resembles something of a living reference library. Hostas are plants of Asian origin, and there are over 200 varieties here. The collection is the baby of Pat Jordan. It's quite an achievement considering that she only started growing hostas 7 years ago, and that stemmed from her interest, as with many other great hosta growers before her, in using the luscious foliage for flower arranging. Now Pat's hooked on hostas. Pat, it would seem that you've got the ideal site here for hostas.
Yes, it's right by the river, as you can see. We're in dappled sunlight here, and it's a damp bed as well. We have to mulch them with well-rotted horse manure because that feeds them. They will grow in virtually anything, but if you feed them, they do so much better. We mulch them in the spring. That also suppresses the weeds, and it helps feed them as well.
Now, something that puts a lot of people off hostas is the fact that they are very attractive to slugs and snails.
Yes.
But your leaves look remarkably free of all these little holes that you can find on them.
Well, being a reference collection and people wanting to come and look at them and perhaps study them, we have to protect them from slugs, and we use slug pellets. But after we've opened our garden in June, I stop putting them down. Then we get attacked by the snails, but you can pick those off.
There's a tremendous variety of different shaped leaves and colours, isn't there?
Yes, the Plantagenets are rounded, the Seboldianas are rounded and cupped and heavily veined. The Fortunii tend to be long and pointed, and the Undulatas are narrow and undulating, as the name suggests. They flower from about June until the end of August, beginning of September. Some of the Plantagenets are just beginning to come in flower now. This is honeybells here with flowers, and summer fragrance through there that's flowering for the first time this year.
That's a
Lovely,
beautiful lilac
beautiful,
flower.
isn't it gorgeous?
Now,
Yes.
if you had to recommend hostas to plant, what would you choose to get the variation?
Well, I started off with Fortunii albopicta and a blue one, a halcyon. A lovely green one, which is lovely for flower arranging, is Royal Standard, and that has a white flower, very late, but a beautiful flower. And then the Undulata, Medio variegata, which has a lovely wavy leaf and really pretty for the centre of a flower arrangement. I think they'd be the first 4 I'd choose for a collection.
Pat, I know that this is the time of year when you like to divide your hostas. Many people would say you should do it in the spring, so why do you do it now?
Well, I like to do it and get them back into the ground while the soil's still warm. Our soil takes such a long time to warm up in the springtime. It's better to get them in now with a bit of slow-release fertiliser, and it gives them a good start for next year. These are potted hostas, and these are quite easy to divide. Take it out of the pot and try and get off as much soil as you can. We've got good roots on this one, look. If we loosen all those, now we can see this is going to divide into 3.
Yes.
There's one. And we're going to get 3 out of this.
Good strong looking plants these,
Aren't they? This is Lunar Eclipse, which is a new variety.
So literally you can be quite ruthless with this.
Oh yes, they'll recover. Good way of swapping plants too, especially when they're expensive.
Right, and you'll
So there we
now
go.
put these back into pots
Yes,
and plant them out in the spring?
that's right. Keep them in the greenhouse over winter.
In Cameron Carmichael's garden, I had no hesitation in choosing this tree as my plant of the week. It's called Flamingo, and it's a variegated form of the American box elder, which is neither a box nor an elder. It's a kind of maple, Aesynegundo. It's tough, it's hardy, it's adaptable, smashing tree for dry areas. Doesn't like too much shade, full sun as Cameron's planted it here. And it's very vigorous, as you can see. These beautiful, exotic-looking leaves. And to maintain it as a bush, you need to prune these shoots late winter, early spring, March time. You prune them down almost to where they began the previous year. Otherwise, you can grow it as a tree, but then that lifts the canopy up above your head. This has got to be one of the most colourful of all hardy trees or large shrubs. How old would this be then, Cameron?
This plant's about 5 years old now, Roy.
So you'll be thinking of pruning it soon?
Yes, I'll probably prune it this year for the first time.
And no doubt you'll have some help, because I do believe you have help in this garden, haven't
Well,
you?
with two sons, there's David and there's Alistair, and they're both fairly keen.
Do you enjoy doing this, Alistair?
Yes,
How often do you have to do it?
round about 3 times a week.
Do you get paid for it?
50 pence for the whole garden.
50 pence for the whole garden? How long does it take to do that?
About half an hour or so.
What other things are you doing?
Just helping around clipping dead bits off the borders and plants with sheep shears and going around the edges of the pond to keep the nice and neat.
Your dad tells me you're the pansy king, Dave.
Yeah,
Is that one of your own seedlings here?
yeah, this is one of the seedlings which I've grown from seed up in the greenhouse.
Right. This is good soil, is it, for them?
Yeah, this is quite good. You just take a wee touch of peat and a wee bit of lime.
Out of the pot. How old are you, David?
I'm on my 8 just now.
Yeah. How long have you been interested in pansies?
Well, I've been interested in them for about maybe 2 years, maybe. I'm not
Really?
sure.
I used to grow one called jackanapes, which was named apparently after a monkey. Do you have that one?
Well, that one there is virtually a bigger form of it. It's and the petals and jackanapes are sort of have got wider spaces between them.
I'm very, very impressed with what you've grown here.
Yeah.
Far more than I used to grow when I was your age, I must admit.
Walking down this street in Uddingston, you'd be hard-pressed to walk past this garden at number 83 without turning your head. It stands out like a rainbow in the sky, and that's exactly what Chris and Robert Jarvis intended. They wanted to brighten up their street and to set an example to encourage others to have a go too. Every year, the Jarvises handle over 3,000 bedding plants, and they redesign the entire layout of their garden twice annually, every spring and every summer. Chris, given that you and your husband are both retired, this must be an awful lot of work for you.
Well, not really, not now. It was when we were starting off to begin with. But I think we have it down to, as one would say, a fine art.
What about cost though? Surely having 3,000 plants to deal with every year must cost a fortune.
Well, it isn't cheap, but there are ways round it. We heard last year of a place where you could buy trays of plantlets, and they worked out very, very well, especially for geraniums and impatiens and begonias, which are very expensive and difficult to germinate for the amateur. But when you get a whole tree of plantlets, it's much easier and there is no problem at all. You just pot them on and away they go.
You've got lots of pansies that you've grown on like that,
Yes,
haven't you?
yes, we just collected them a fortnight ago and we have potted them up.
And how does the price compare to growing them by seed?
Oh, the price is cheaper doing it this way, because when you buy packets of seed, they're getting ever so much dearer nowadays, and you're not sure of 100% germination, whereas when you buy the trays, you never a blank.
What about cuttings? Do you take any cuttings?
We take cuttings of the named geraniums, but not the multi-blooms, because you're just as cheap to start straight with the plantlets. And we take cuttings of fuchsias because they're all named varieties.
As well as the floral section, there's also a productive kitchen garden here, beautifully screened by a wall of sweet peas. They're also benefiting the vegetables by adding nitrogen to the soil. Well, you really have got some very healthy looking vegetables in your patch here, Chris. Any particular secret?
No, not unless. Why we do it is that we dig, when we're bringing the annuals from the front, they're very soft and they go down very quickly. So instead of putting in the compost heap, we dig a trench here, maybe about 15 inches deep, fill the trench, then overfill it, next trench, same again, and work our way along to the end until we've disposed of all the annuals from the front garden.
I've never seen vegetables grown effectively on flowers before.
So it's not only hostas in this garden, Howard, you're allowed a few fruit trees.
Yes, I have a plum tree or two, and this one particularly is a problem for me because it's bushy at the bottom, bushy at the top, but in the middle it looks as though it's short of vitamins.
Yes, there's quite a gap, isn't there?
Yes.
The reason for this, in fact, is that it's suffering from lack of light. You've planted it right close, in fact, to this great large apple tree, which is taking all the light from it. And you can see, in fact, with the tree itself, how it's actually growing away towards the light and how all the fruit, in fact, is on the outside. So you have a choice, really. You either move it, which would be a job and a half.
Yes, I'm reluctant to do that. I think I'd rather leave it where it is.
Or you can take some of the foliage out of this tree here, just to tidy it through, because it's an old apple tree and is only useful for its ornamental value, so you're not too worried about the fruit. And then when you've done that, in fact, if you actually take the top out of the tree, reduce it in size next summertime, you'll ensure that this plum tree will break and the stems will come out from these large gaps here in the middle.
Right.
So rather than having a large section where there is nothing, in fact, new growth will come.
Matthew, I have another plum tree which also has problems. Perhaps you could give me some advice on that.
Yeah, show me where it is.
Right. Matthew, this is my Victoria plum tree, and as you can see, it's very congested, and I certainly welcome your advice, indeed some help in perhaps bringing it into a healthier state.
It just really needs a little tidying up. You'll see in your life many more worse ones than these. The problem with pruning plums is, in fact, that they suffer from something called silverleaf. That's a fungal disease that actually gets in through any cuts that you make. So you should prune between June and the end of August, when the tree, in fact, is most able to protect itself against that. It's a job that you would normally do, really, when you've harvested all the plums. So if we tidy it up now, you'll lose a few. And of course, they're still on the tree because it's a late season, but we should be able to get away with that. The key thing with pruning plums, in fact, is that you have two things that you must remember. One is to prune in the summertime, and the other is to keep your pruning to a minimum. So all, in fact, I would do with this is just go through it and take out the dead, diseased, dying, damaged branches, just to tidy it up, just to open it up, and to ensure that the tree remains healthy. It's as simple as that. Now I can start, in fact, by just taking off this one here. And you can see quite clearly that it is dead, and it's ideal, in fact, for the entrance of fungal diseases. So if I make a cut here, like that, you'll be able to see quite clearly that the goodness will go down the stem and into the fruit.
Lovely, thank you.
You know, Rebecca, there is one plant we haven't seen in Glasgow gardens, not surprisingly, the butterbur. Look how it forms these thickets by the river. When I was a kid in the north, we used to cut these and use them as umbrellas to keep the rain off.
I think I need it as a parasol today, Roy, to keep out this lovely sunshine. Well, sadly, that brings us to the end of our visit to Glasgow. Don't forget that all the details of today's programme are in our fact sheet, and you can get all of the fact sheets for the series, plus lots of special gardening offers, by paying £8 to become a member of Channel 4's Gardening Club. The address is coming up now. Alternatively, why not give us a ring and join over the phone? The number's also coming up, and the lines will be open until midnight tonight and from Monday onwards during office hours. Well, we're going to move on now to Lancashire to meet gardeners there for next week's programme. I do hope you'll be able to join us. From all of us, until then, goodbye. Would you like this, Matthew?
And here's the address and phone number for joining the Garden Club. Or if you just like this week's fact sheet, send a cheque or postal order for £1 payable to Channel 4 and mark the envelope fact sheet number 9.